Okay.
guys, thank you for joining us in this discussion. We're looking at unwrapping this interesting topic that came about recently, and the title that we're looking at is actually gender equality. Has it created a new norm in society or a new monster? And it all started when we had an issue about this lady who felt that she was being watched in the gym. And she pushed it out on TikTok, accusing this individual of looking at, staring at her, only to be to realize that it wasn't so. But it's too late. I mean, his face, his name was already plastered out there, and some men did voice their concerns and on the social forums that do they feel safe? Is it fair for them? So that's an issue that I think we should deeply look at. That's why we're here.
But it's looking at someone a crime. You mentioned staring. Staring was like look without blinking, or looking at something or looking at someone, a crime. That we are all attracted to two things. I mean, just human being, right? We want to see clean things, we want to see pretty things. None of us want to see a sight which is a sore to the eyes, something like that. I thought looking should not be a crime, but she make it sound as though like, why are you looking at me? I'm not sure if that's a crime to even look at her in a public place.
I don't know whether we should start with the idea of whether it's a crime, but we should ask ourselves. Therein lies the problem, right? It is precisely that. It is objectification of women, pretty things. We are things to look at because we're women, and therefore we see them as it is. But they're people too. We determine that objectification as the first set of problem. It's not about crime itself. It's about social norms and expectations of behavior that places the women as things in space for us to look at, objectify. And the word Hadi, with all due respect, says is a sore eyes, we don't look. So then it is also the other thing. We're speaking of them as things in space. Not so good looking, we won't look. Good looking, we'll look.
No.
But how about human beings?
No.
So the feeling of being unsafe goes beyond just touch. The first act of that behavior is already a problem.
So we can't look at anything.
No, but
So
in fact, how you look.
but how
is
do we
already an
look
issue.
at a woman? Just look and blink and move on? And how do we look at a car? Just look and blink and move on?
Yeah. And that's precisely it. It's that it places us always in the position of being looked at. And I think we now move into the question of the woman, right? Because that's the reason why we're here. And we are moving away from question about gender equality, whether it is a monster or not. But I think the word gender equality in itself has to be unpacked. What do we mean by that, really? Do we have gender equality? Because I don't think what the woman was doing touches on gender equality. But the woman is projecting something about the inadequacy of the system there is in Singapore, the society that she is living in right now. And all these talks, as a result of what Tony's article resulted in, that's excellent. That men are now beginning to say that's what they're feeling. It's not about comparison. It's about beginning to achieve the empathy of what women have been feeling for the longest time. So let's see where that conversation goes and how we can really unpack why that conversations occur and why that act transpired the way it did, rather than say whether it is right or wrong, because right and wrong is such binaries.
What these men are saying is that they're no longer safe.
Yes, good. Let's talk about that.
And then what the women are saying is these men are not comparing apples with apples. When what do they mean by safe?
Precisely, and I agree with those women who ask that question. What it means by being safe. They can air it. The whole system that they can respond to is very much for them, and that's really unpack that too. You're talking about the law later. Does it occur that way? Is that so binary? I think the complexities of it is the one that we're here for.
So we're looking at the macro things on the bigger scale rather than the micro issue that has been popped up.
No, the micro issue is a result of the macro. if we fail to see the macro, we end up saying, Hadi, that's not nice. Then we're still going back to you being not nice. But you, in your exemplification of whatever you do, your behavior, is the repercussions of all those other layers that have influenced you. Why I'm speaking out is also the implications of my experiences. So it not just become, I'm attacking Hadi, I'm attacking Tony, but we are representations of so many layers of upbringing and influences that society has taught us along the way. So let's look at that macro, because it affects how we behave in the micro.
But yet the law actually protects the woman. When the law is enacted in Parliament, it deems to protect the woman because it says that a woman has the right to live in dignity. A woman has the right to live free of fear, of coercion, of violence and discrimination. And that is where the men come in to say, hey, what about us? Are you saying that we're the perpetrators of this violence, of this discrimination? And that is when these men, I suppose, feel unsafe.
It's a good point to ask why then this law is enacted. If we look at the statistics and research have shown, and unfortunately I'm not a representation of that advocacy group because I don't have the statistics, but I read up on them. The history has shown over the years, violence is enacted on women by men. And that law, which was changed in May 21, especially for marital rape, I'm referring to marital rape, which was enacted in May, I think, we changed in May 2020, I believe.
2020,
Yeah,
yes.
May 2020 was something that women lobbied for the longest time because the law says to protect, right? But when it came to marital rape in the household, for the longest time, it couldn't be convicted.
Yes.
And it took Parliament over 30 years before that was changed. And women shouted, women banged doors. Some women just kept quiet because they just resigned to the fact that there is no recourse. And then it got changed. What I'm trying to say is society has to be accountable. Laws have to be accountable, updated. And then when there is no safe space to have a conversation for women, that transpired. I'm not saying what she did with the camera is right. There's a separate thing to unpack, but her behavior and her feelings need to be unpacked separately from the act that she did. Yeah.
So if I jump in here, definitely we know from a historical perspective there was a need for the law to come into place to protect women.
True.
For reasons being like what you mentioned, statistics being abused, rightfully so. So I think it's all about having that conversation now. And yes, men are now made to see that and feel that what women went through from an objectifying perspective. But if we now take it from a societal perspective, and for women to now say, hey, this is how I feel and I'm going to do it back to you, or I'm going to make you go through that same experience, I think that's something that we don't want to. Where I come from the perspective that, okay, there were mistakes from a mindset and from a societal perspective, but moving forward, how can we do it together? There are good men and there are perpetrators.
Yes.
Both men and women are unsafe, and they're not safe from being wrongfully accused. So I think definitely, the laws are there in place to protect from a historical and statistical perspective. But this day and age where we have the phone as a weapon, that can really impact someone's lives, and I think there are instances where men and then women have been falsely accused, and on social media and in the courts of public opinion.
To answer Kevin's question, right, I think as with any other movement, right, it always comes from a very noble place, and it's moving in the right direction, but there are always extremist elements of it, right, that goes against the original intention of it. And I think that is the key, that I'm trying to address, in what I wrote. So I think most men, in fact, I think all men, if not most, can understand struggles of a woman, okay, more or less, okay. All men have mothers, most of them will have girlfriends and wives, and some will have daughters. So I think we can all be empathetic, right, towards the struggles of both genders, right? But the issue here is not about men not feeling that women should be protected. I think most men do feel that they should. What I think the issue is that they feel is about wrongful accusations of innocent men being dragged through the mud for not doing, being accused of something that they did not do. And I think that is an unnecessary crease in this movement, and I think it's unhelpful to the movement in general.
That's why I said that the act of the woman has to be unpacked from the movement. We cannot say it is a result of that. That is like a 1 + 1 = 2, but it is not true. The equation of that woman's action should not be pegged onto a movement. The woman did it because she responded to it in her way. There are many reasons for it, and the act in itself should be looked at separately from a movement. Secondly, a movement will, no matter what type of movement it is, will result in a variety of interpretation. Religion is a cause of that. You can say religion itself is a movement, and there's so many interpretations on the ground of how religion is upheld, whatever religion it is. So I do not think that a movement itself should stop because of the interpretations. What is wonderful and useful is a result of your exercise and therefore your article. And I wish TheHomeGround Asia did not pull that article out. And I will say this here, it's sad that you pulled it out because you have the moral courage to stick by that article and allow that conversation to continue. Is that resulted in the conversation. And that resulted in today. That resulted in me meeting you, Hati, and listening to you. That resulted in you speaking up and therefore asking me for my opinion. But we're all having opinions here. And that's the beauty of it. And that we can say, thank God for that movement.
But what these guys are actually saying is, they have the Me Too movement in the US, the woke environment, because everyone seemed to have woken up. So because of that, they feel that, okay, whatever I do is wrong. So there was this man who said that he needed to move in front of the woman on the escalator because he may be deemed to have been staring at her butt. Mm-hmm. And he would rather her stare at his butt, so it's safer that way. Things like that. And these men are actually saying that in this way, they feel society is no longer safe for them.
I'm glad he's beginning to think, because that's what exactly is needed. But it's a start of the thinking before we suddenly equalize again. Every movement will have issues at the beginning, at the middle. But what's great is that men are beginning to think before they act, beginning to reflect what it means to be empathetic.
Right.
It is a word, How do we then exemplify this empathy? And that action has resulted in thinking, and thinking is part of the action. So he has thought about it, and he has moved in front of the woman, although he still considers sexual objectification in his thought, because he says it's better for the woman to stare at my butt than the other way around.
Yeah.
But I would just wish we just say, I move forward. Finish.
Right, but I think it's about the application. So I think the whole women's rights movement is about, like you said, the nobility behind it, right? It's about men respecting women. But what transpired in this case is that men have started to become fearful, of women, of being accused by women. And I think that is, like you said, the objective may still be the fact that he put himself in a safer position. But I just feel that it is the wrong means to an end.
I think it's great men are beginning to be fearful. Let's go through that. Let's have that conversation. Why must you always think about safety as such an issue? Yes, because women have always been unsafe, the feeling of unsafe. Now, now there is that discourse of what it means for you to feel unsafe or safe. Fantastic, let's have that conversation and then we can move forward. What would be the equilibrium? If we didn't come to that wall, we don't have this conversation, men. It's okay.
So if I jump in here in terms of having that conversation, and I think we are a mature society,
Yes.
and being able to have that journey and that conversation in a safe, fair environment. I mean, we have, I think we discussed earlier about the doctor who spent 2 years having to clear his name just because he was accused of misconduct or something related to it. And the accuser doesn't experience anything at all. No, she just had to say something, and this guy has to defend himself. So I mean, I hear the need for the discourse, for the discussion, but that doesn't mean that society has to go through that same painful journey, where we can, from a mature perspective, maybe accelerate the learning curve, or have a safe environment, because we know, I mean, we didn't have to go through, there has been historical movements over hundreds of years to achieve where we are now, be it industrial revolution or whichever movement, but in this modern days where we have technology, where we move so fast, is there a safer way, in your opinion, for this transition, for men and for society to have that equilibrium that we are all aiming for?
And therein lies also another issue, that we think the court is the right arbiter for it. You know, because other cases have proven that the court didn't do a good justice. For example, the molestation case on the escalator by that Univoc boy. There's so many, there were 3 cases, but one of them was about the uni boy that has had perpetuated molestation on a series of cases.
Yeah.
And then the court's justice was, you have a bright future because, you did so well. And I couldn't believe it. Even my partner, husband, men, he too was like, huh? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is, you raised the court case, and it's not necessarily clean cut, because we only see it on the papers, right? Yeah. So whatever the reasons behind it, is it the last arbiter? That's the question mark. Second, when it comes to cases such as this, women are also feeling the sense that they have to perform what it feels to be a victim. So there have been records and research done on how women have to perform their victimhood in court. If some women are numb, they're not crying, they seem stoic, they performed hard, believability is not there. Horror, that means performativity of trauma. And they can lose a court case, by the way. Yeah, I'm not saying that it happens here or not, I'm not sure, because, but there have been cases, if you read a lot of academic journals and publications in this area, where the performativity of trauma that women have to project, including going to a police station, how you appear, how you're dressed by the time you get there, prejudgments are already there. There is a sense that there is a way to project yourself as the victim. Yeah. So, these are all the slippages of what happens on paper. That means you have these protection rights on paper, but these slippages occur when it's enacted. So it is already in place. That means you have that, but in society, all these, because they're managed by human beings. They're managed by human beings, so you cannot say that society is not part of it all, because it's managed and performed by human beings. And
Correct. So I think that's where this sense of being unsafe and implications from not only the courts, but for a person's personal brand, persona, or his character when it's called into challenge. I think there are safeguards out there. I mean, we know of the cancelling culture, the defamation culture out there, and I think Singaporeans should be aware that there are laws out there to protect you should you be defamed wrongfully. online on social media. But again, I think we all know that the challenges out there, especially I think court being the last arbiter, has its faults.
Its
Yeah.
limits
And
as
its
well.
Limits, yeah.
I think that's where even before we get to the courts, it's how men and women as a community work together to address,
Yes.
to grow,
Yes, yes.
and I think to have a framework of how we
Yes.
can work together, because we see and we experience and we hear documented challenges that women face growing up. And it's no different between, I think, the whites and the blacks in other countries. So I think it's how now we move forward, learning, and not expecting the other partner or the other party to go through the same suffering just to I can feel good. So I think that's where I think I want to throw onto the panel here is how can we look at a framework where men and women or communities grow together and address both issues that women face growing up, are still facing now and will face in the future, and what men are going through the same thing. Maybe
I think to undo this is not the easiest thing. We are binded by our own religion and culture that have that egoistic index to it. The men go out, the women stay, protect this and that, blah blah blah. Then we have the modern Western influence where I see you as an equal. Now, it is a conflict. In order to move forward, right, there are some things that needs to be undone, not from the male side, but from the both ends and culturally itself. You need to see this on a different plateau, on level ground. Then will be a new level playing field until we can undo our very own culture about how men should behave in a society, how female should behave in a society. Then it's very hard to move forward. I think that the law protects the women because of all the crimes that bad men do against them. And because of that law, some good men feel vulnerable too, right? And the law should also calibrate itself and see how they can protect the innocent, be it a woman or a man, moving forward. Because there are perpetrators who are on the female side who understand and dribble the law and abuse it to a point where men become the victim. But it's harder to prove when you're a man. It's easier to prove as a victim because it has been already in there for the longest time that we are the aggressors. What if it's the other way around? How do we equate this on a level playing field? So there are many things, the culture, religion, being Asian itself, then plus the Western ideology where you want to marry and see everything on an equal ground. It's not going to be easy, but in order to move forward, then you need to have more bigger discussion and see how you can actually move forward in one line together.
That's why I think, Lina, you mentioned the discourse and discussion is important. I mean,
And education too in schools. Do you know that we don't have gender studies in schools?
Yeah.
We have a problem with that. So I give you an example because I do a lot of education in schools, and I met a bunch of primary 1s and 2s, and there was this book. I was doing a demonstration to a bunch of teachers in a local primary school, and it was about language. Actually, it's English language, and I was trying to use drama, theatre as a way to engage the kids to talk. And so the picture storybook indicated two farmers, and the two farmers, it was drawn in such a way that honestly I didn't pick this up because immediately I assumed the drawing of a longer haired figure was the woman and the shorter haired figure was the man.
Yes.
You're talking about culture, right? Talking about upbringing. This is exactly it, because long, short, even though I have short hair, is that stereotype, right? So we went on to talk about the story. And we said, oh, look, let's give these two characters names, because in this book, there are no names, so we can talk about them, right? And one child said, oh, this is John, that one is Jane. And then another, it was a girl, a young girl, said, why do you make it sound as if it's just a Jane? It could be Jimmy. And then a boy, no, it cannot be Jimmy because Jane has long hair. And the girl stood up, but I have short hair. Now they are initiating at the age of 7 or 8 conversations about gender representation. And then another child, a boy, it cannot be snigger, because if there were two men working together, because it was about a farm, there was a house behind it. And so the child, snigger, the innuendo is gay, they're homosexual, oh, giggle. And it took us that brought us an opportunity of saying, what about two men working together? They're two men working on a farm, just like your security guards at school gates. The two men. Can't two men work together? Then we ended up talking about teachers. Most school teachers are women. And they have a variety of shapes and sizes as well as length of hair. Gender discourse has, that particular day, gender discourse began. But the school teachers are uneasy about it. Because of society or the way our education framework, talking about framework here, because you're asking about framework, how framework has initiated itself that let's not go there.
They need to break the conformity.
Yes.
And breaking the conformity also involves bringing up children equally and not tell the boys, you cannot cry, boys don't cry.
And girls, you cannot climb trees, you will
Because
fall.
girls don't climb trees.
Yes. Or instilling in girls the issue of fear. Don't do that, you'll get a scar on your knee. As if scarring a knee is okay for boys, but not for girls. You know? And as a result, you don't fall. Oh, you cannot, you must be ladylike. You cannot sit like this, you must sit like that. And all these are inculcated even at school. What is ladylike? It's really Victorian, honestly. So, going back to what Hadi is saying, that honestly, these movements, these Me Too movements can be pushed even further, says some of my women friends, advocates in this area. What these movements have afforded a generation like myself, I'm in the, I don't know what generation I'm called. We talk.
X.
Am I X? You know that these boomers, X, Y, Z, and all that, millennial and Z. So we didn't have this language.
No.
In fact, in the olden days, and this was informed to me by a dear friend who is a lawyer, and she writes copiously and she's beautiful. And I didn't have a time to chance. I had a conversation with her, and she said, you know, her generation was having conversation after all these incidents, and in the past, when an incident like this occur, we don't even know it's called harassment because there was no language to say it. We just said, I was made uncomfortable. I don't know whether it was because of me. And it has occurred many, many times. You know, when I was growing up, it occurred so often, I thought it was me. Occurred to me all the time. At the age of 8, all the way till I went to university, and all the way when I went to work. It is a recurrent factor, and I didn't know how to deal with it.
I think the women in general should know the powers that they have or the laws that protects them. They must know first. These are the things which is wrong upon me. They must know it first. A lot of people are just ignorant about it, or they just do not know where to place themselves within the law itself. So like, just leave it, just be safe. Let's not rock the boat. But because they do not understand what protects them, they kept quiet. Right? And it's being abused by those who knows, and those who doesn't know being the one who is always being the victim all this while. In order to push this forward, right, you cannot just go on white outburst. There's so many pillars to it, right? So if you see this whole issue in this one big circle like this, right, you need to push one button, one vertical up here, settle it, then it's like doing the fence, right? You need to push one. Then you move the boundary. You cannot push all at one go because a lot of people are not ready to understand. So you need to decide when you want to push the boundaries, which vertical first.
I think the younger generation, they are ready.
Yeah.
And I think
They've educated me so well.
and I think
I'm glad they exist.
And I think you're young with technology. We can actually move this a lot faster than rather than waiting 30
Yes.
years for the law to change.
Yes. Would a woman approach the police when something like this occur? Because knowing that a law exists doesn't mean that there are steps to address them.
You need to know how to apply the law upon you first.
Yes, yes.
Before you see the police, you
Yes.
must know what you need on your background.
Yes. And like for example, if you go to I give you a story again, it's like way beyond, and that reveals age. As a teenager, a friend of mine was accosted in a lift. Again, let's not talk about gender accostation, but it is a man. It was a man behind her, and it was in a lift, and she took it to go up to her flat, and the man ejaculated upon her skirt in a lift, and she was maybe 15. I remember it was a teenage time. We were all teenagers at the time, and she was so stressed by it. She ran home, and she told, of course, her father. Now the father then was angry and said, "Why did you go into the lift at that time when you saw that man?" I mean, who would know? You see, my point is,
It's like it's your fault for going into the lift.
she went to the police. Now, this was a long, long time ago. And of course, the questions mean she has to reenact it. She has to tell. The trauma is reenacted once to the father. The trauma is reenacted second time to the police. It was a male policeman. Now, of course, this is a long time ago. And that reenactment for a 15-year-old, you wouldn't want to have it on any daughter of yours or any friend, anyone, because it's a reenactment of what she felt at 15. Okay? And in the reenactment to another male officer, the question that the male officer asked, and she was accounting it to me, was what was she wearing?
It was a school uniform.
It doesn't matter. My point here is, I would like to know if THG Asia would like to do an article. What change has taken place since then? You know, when these things happen and you go and apply the law at a police station, who's doing the interview?
The police generally.
Yeah, but who? Hadi wouldn't even consider the gender. But if it was me, I have to consider the gender. I
Because
have to.
the problem is, if you were to go and make a report on this, the police people at the counter would be the NS boys.
You see, so these are all problems. That's what I'm trying to
Yes.
say. We don't want to reenact our trauma 3 times over. And the conversation between the person that is taking down the report and the person that is reporting it is frightening. Better not report.
I think definitely there are procedures.
But how would you get justice to be served if it's not recounted?
Yes, there must be a way. That's why I said then we have to think about it intelligently and sensitively. For example, could you have a female officer?
You can have a female officer in cases like that. You need to request it.
Yeah, you
Yes.
see, do women know you can request it?
Not everyone.
not everyone,
Precisely,
yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say. You know there is a law, so what? You don't know the processes that you can effect it. Let me give you a very simple case in point. Contracts. When you're given a contract, you just sign because you didn't know that it is within your rights to change the clause. So many people don't argue for a change in the clause. I'm not comfortable with this clause unless you were legally trained or someone has informed you. Same thing with anything in your life.
Or you read the whole contract.
Precisely, many people don't. So there are all these things, we are not going, you cannot assume just because there is this law to protect you that the effect on the floor is protective, safe. That's a very different equation altogether.
Definitely, I think that's where we see the education coming in.
Right.
But again, if I definitely we look at that, I think
I encourage you to.
Society has evolved. I think we have special needs training for officers on the ground. We have counselors there. So I definitely we will ask the police. They are and they should in this day and age have procedures like that. And it's not new. So I'm comfortable and confident that the police force has something in place.
And that's great. Once you have that, and this is where Hadi said you must inform the women, right? So let's inform. Informing women or informing men is not just good enough to say clause number 5. La 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 la, women's dignity. It's not enough.
No, it is a public education.
Yes.
It is a slow burn.
Yes.
But it has, so when it's a slow burn, then it is imbibed into everybody slowly but surely. It's not like I tell you this, just read all these things. No, it's not like that. This is a long haul. The women must understand that we are also changing. The women must understand that society is trying to cope with the changes, with the dynamics of women having the education, understanding.
I think men has to understand. Men have to understand that women are changing.
The men are coping.
Yes, but I think more than coping, you have to learn to get on with it.
Yeah.
Catch up. I would encourage men to catch up.
Right.
So that we can be on a level playing field to talk about it. Because the discourse of the women movement, to be fair, it has risen so far that actually the men are left behind.
This way, this discussion is very important. I mean, women and the discourse and the Me Too movement has grown to such an extent that I think we are going to see men stepping up and having our own movement, which I think that's where we will see two parties coming together, and it's that journey from now to that moment where rightfully so men are catching up, definitely. And I'm just hoping that with this discussion and more discussion, education in schools, better understanding, better appreciation, more empathy for both parties, that we will have a good outcome. But like what I was asking just now, I mean, we see the millennials championing this movement.
It's more Gen Z actually.
Gen Z.
It's Gen Z.
So we have this group, this generation pushing for using technology, communicating, and that's wonderful. But again, what are the safety barriers for both parties? We don't want women or one party to falsely accuse the other party or create unhappiness or create false accusations and stuff. But what's the framework? I mean, is there besides the legal framework, is there a way that both communities, men and women, can come together and have a proper discussion and hopefully a positive outcome?
Okay, so first of all, I'm not Gen Z, I'm actually Gen Y, but let me just ask Nolina for a clarification about the police case. So is it a matter of gender that the male police officer cannot handle a sexual assault complaint?
I think it is not about gender nor about capacity, but it is really from the perspective of sensitivity. Yeah, because that case I counted for you was like eons ago when I was 15. So however that was, how long ago was that? 1980s. It was in the 80s. So, but what that account asks for is what has changed now. Are there practices in place in the police case, for example, in the case of the police? Sensitivity training for both women police officers and male police officers. I just accounted that 15 years ago because generally those at the counters were men police officers that took this information down. And at one point, they were young men. You must also see from the perspective, you talk about empathy, right? Then you must see from the perspective of the person, the young female young girl that is going to that police station, recounting the trauma of being accosted by a man behind her for no rhyme or reason, just because she is a woman. She entered the lift, she's a woman, and the man jerked off behind her. Now she's recounting this, and she's recounting it to a male figure. If we talk about empathy, we talk about sensitivity, then we have to consider what makes this person comfortable to have to repeat that story over and over again, looking at a man. There is shame. We need to understand the psyche of the woman too. It brings me back to the point when I was young in a bus and a man rubbed his genitalia on my shoulders. And it occurs all the time at buses. After a while, you look at a man coming towards you and you think, oh my God, this is going to happen again. Now, I didn't move. Everybody can repeat and tell you as a girl, you should have done this, you should have moved. So easy for you to say. I never repeat these stories because it's the embarrassment, it's the shame. I don't want to tell it to anyone else except to my very close friends. And when we say it, we feel safe because it's a quiet moment and we say, I know it was horrible, it was horrible. Because you can feel it. Now you don't know how that frightens you the next time you board a bus. Planes. You have a man sitting next to you, not enough space, I suppose, and they're reasonably sized man, and because I'm small, the knees spread open, touching you throughout the flight. You don't even have the courage to ask a stewardess to say, hello, can I change seat? Because there is no way to change seat. You're stuck there. Now, if you ask me to account it, of course, now I can. It's been like, I don't know, 25 years ago. But at the point, I never spoke about it because it's shame. You think it's your fault. So you talk about the empathy, it's about training. So how do we train both female and male officers to understand this is a psychology and the psyche of that person coming to you at the point to report? It's not so easy. So to have a questionnaire, that's why I asked THG Asia to do this research. What is the questionnaire now? Is the questionnaire asking, so what were you wearing at the time?
We will find it out.
I would love to know what is the procedure so that women then say, it's part of the education that you're talking about. Then women can say, no, actually times have changed. Because this legacy, I don't say it anymore because it also then perpetuates a legacy and a myth that it has not changed. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I don't want to tell this story. And that's why I'm inviting THG Asia to do this research, to tell us a different story.
So how can we have that safe discussion in terms of, we talk about education, being familiar. How can men and women develop that better understanding, that empathy moving forward? Can I just throw that out for each one of us?
Right, first of all, I think it's very important. The most important is to stop classifying, boxing people up as men versus women, right? And you're not a woman, so you don't understand the struggles of a woman and the dangers that women face, right? So as I was thinking earlier, that is equivalent to like saying that an oncologist cannot treat you for cancer because he hasn't had cancer himself, which is not true, right? Because it doesn't take someone to suffer from something to empathize and to come up with solutions to an issue. Right, we all can and we should all be part of the solution, right? And education is one way, and I think education should work both ways. So, like you said, women should not be ashamed of reporting sexual assault. They should be educated that it's within their right. There's nothing to be ashamed of. They have done nothing wrong, and they should be brave enough to report it, right? And make sure that justice is served. Whether or not justice is served at the end, that's not something I can decide. But on the other hand, right, women should also be educated on the rights that they have. What protections you have, how you should apply the protections that is being accorded to you, and how you should use it. What constitutes harassment, what is simply a compliment, and how to not abuse it. And I think that is something that the next step we have to move forward.
Judith?
Well, I think both men and women should be educated at the same time in the same space, rather than, okay, we will have an education simply for women and then another one for men. So why not have them in the same room together, have the same education, feel the same empathy for each other before coming up with any sort of conclusion?
I think that's where the schools play an important role. Schools in primary, secondary, tertiary.
In order to change this, I think education is still 2 steps forward. You need to learn on how to respect other people as a person.
Yes.
I respect you beyond your gender. I respect you beyond your race. I respect you beyond your age. If we can't do that, you can't move forward. How are we going to even have an an equal space or equal standing when I see you as someone lesser than I am. So until we learn on how to imbibe and live that respect towards other people, and respecting yourself before you can respect other people, so culture plays a very big part. It goes down to how you live your life. You need to change that. You need to say, I look at Norlina, I say, she deserves my respect not because she's Norlina, because she's a person. Kevin deserves my respect not because Kevin is a man, because Kevin is a person. We need to move one step forward before we can leap for as far as we can. So we need to have that respect imbibe in us before we can even go to the basic education, talking, discussing. If I can respect anyone, I can't move forward with this. It's about, I'm better than you lah. Then the woman will go like, no, you wait lah, the law will see. You're better than you. You wait and see. It will grind you. It will never be okay.
I would like to see the word empathy unpacked further, because you can't have the notion of empathy and telling women that they should feel what they should feel. You're not in the position to tell them what they should feel. That is the first step. We should stop telling women, especially women who have experienced certain victimhood. That the word is not even appropriate for me. I have to rephrase that. Women who have experienced the trauma of them being assaulted in whatever way the assault is, because the spectrum of assault is wide. We should stop telling them just because there is this education, then they should have the bravery to speak up. I think all that is very patronizing. That is the first step towards sensitivity. You can't understand fully. No matter how much education, you can't understand fully how it breaks a woman, how it breaks a teenager, and some survive it, overcome it, some carry it with great repercussions. It's not so easy, and I wish society, no matter how, even law, educators, teachers, the word should is patronizing. That's one thing I would like to put forward. I do agree, respect. I do agree with it. But that's where the respect plays. If we see respect as being very important, then the shoulds should not be there. You should be like this. You should be like that. Because really? Really? So I do agree that respect just allow for that space to listen, for the grief to be aired. And when we do it, we hold that space for that person to speak it without telling that person, you should have reported it. You should have done this. Because at the point, as I was telling you, if you were listening to my account, there was no way I was going to tell anybody. I ran away from a bus because somebody was ejaculating me in bus number 10 in the back end of the double-decker. I remember how he looks like. I remember the color. I remember the shape I saw. I remember the sound. And I was 19. Bus number 10 because I was going to NUS. I got down quickly before I could even get to NUS. The fear was palpable. It was like that far. It wasn't even next to me. You can't tell me I should have gone to the police. I should have done that. Education is the first step to lead to an understanding. But most importantly, what education does is give you knowledge. I think that's what is missing in our conversation, is knowledge. And discourses like this, your report, Tony, was essential. Unfortunately, what do you call these warriors?
Keyboard warriors.
Thank you. The keyboard warriors, and there is that repercussions to keyboard warriors, and you're one of the the fallout to that keyboard warriors. You need time and space to acknowledge that for yourself and how you're going to deal with it moving forward for other articles, because that left you with a mark, say, can't I say anything? Can't I speak my mind? Is everything I say going to be policed? That's the repercussions of that. And we all have to own our responsibility as people on the internet, because when we write something out, we will hurt someone. And we have to own that. We have to take our own responsibility and accountability to say what we have done. Just like that lady, she has to own this too.
So it's again about having that space and that empathy, that respect. And I think we, in this day and age, in this mature society, can give it to one another, and we should have in place that empathy and that understanding to support one another. And I think there is a lot more that can be talked about this topic, and that's where the HomeGround Asia, we hope to dwell more and ultimately have a big town hall where it's not the final discussion, but it is the first step to more people understanding, more people having education, and more people respecting one another. So I thank you for
Thank you for taking the initiative. Thank you.
And we hope to have more talk about